The radio crackled with static, then silence. Major Kellerman stood in the operations center at Bagram Airfield, staring at the tactical display as if willing it to change. The green blips representing friendly forces blinked weakly against the gray topographical lines of the Hindu Kush. His jaw tightened. Command had already made the call. The convoy was lost. 18 Marines, cut off in a valley so narrow the satellites could barely track them, surrounded by an enemy force that had materialized like smoke. The extraction window had closed. The weather was turning. The sun would set in 40 minutes, and after that, night vision optics wouldn't save anyone from the terrain. 2 Apache gunships had already burned through their ammunition and returned to base. The AC-130 couldn't get a clear angle without risking the friendlies below. It was over. Kellerman reached for the handset to make the call no officer ever wants to make, when a voice broke through the static. Bagram Actual, this is Hawthorne 2-1. I'm still in the area. I've got 30 Mike remaining and enough fuel for one more pass. Kellerman's hand froze. Hawthorne 2-1. He knew that call sign. Lieutenant Colonel Marin Hawthorne, the A-10 pilot who'd been flying close air support missions for nearly 2 decades, the one everyone called Mother Hen behind her back. Not out of respect, out of condescension. She was 43 years old, ancient by fighter pilot standards, flying a plane the Air Force had been trying to retire since before she even joined. The Warthog. Ugly, slow, stubborn, just like the jokes they made about her in the ready room. Kellerman glanced at the display. Hawthorne's aircraft icon hovered near the edge of the combat zone alone. Every other asset had pulled back. He pressed the transmit button. Hawthorne 2-1, negative. RTB immediately. Weather's closing in and your bingo fuel. Static. Then her voice again, calm, almost gentle. Bagram, I can hear them on the emergency freak. They're calling for help. I can make it. Kellerman closed his eyes. Command doctrine was clear. You don't risk assets on lost causes. You don't send one pilot into a canyon at dusk with minimal ammunition and no backup. You don't bet lives on hope. But something in her voice made him hesitate. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't defiance. It was something older than military protocol, something that predated rank and radio call signs. It was the sound of someone who had already decided. Hawthorne, he said quietly, you won't make it back. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, he could hear the smile in her words. Then I better make this count. The A-10 Thunderbolt II banked hard left, dropping altitude as Marin Hawthorne pushed the throttle forward. The twin turbofan engines roared, a sound like grinding metal and defiance. Below her, the mountains rose in jagged peaks, their slopes painted in shadow as the sun dipped toward the horizon. She adjusted her grip on the stick, feeling the familiar vibration of the airframe through her gloves. The Warthog wasn't elegant. It didn't slice through the sky like an F-16 or vanish from radar like an F-22. It was a flying gun platform, built around the GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon, designed to take punishment and keep flying, just like her. She scanned the heads-up display, eyes flicking across altitude, airspeed, fuel levels. The numbers weren't good. She had maybe 20 minutes of flight time left, and that was optimistic. The canyon ahead was tight, walls rising nearly vertical on both sides. The convoy was somewhere down there, pinned against the northern ridge by enemy fire. She could see the smoke now, black columns rising like funeral pyres. Her radio crackled. All stations, this is Paladin 1-6. We're taking heavy casualties. Request immediate close air support, over. The voice was young, strained, fraying at the edges. Marin keyed her mic. Paladin 1-6, Hawthorne 2-1 inbound. Mark your position with smoke, orange if you've got it. A beat of silence. Then, Hawthorne, they said everyone pulled back. Is that you, ma'am? She smiled despite herself. Word traveled fast. It's me, Marine. Now pop that smoke before I have to guess. Orange smoke billowed from the northern edge of the convoy's position, a bright beacon against the gray rock. Marin adjusted her approach, lining up the canyon. The enemy positions were dug into the southern ridge, high ground with overlapping fields of fire. Smart. Disciplined. These weren't amateurs. She toggled through her weapon systems. 30mm rounds left in the gun, enough for maybe 3 passes if she was careful. No missiles, no bombs, just the cannon and her own stubbornness. She dropped lower until the canyon walls blurred past her cockpit. The altimeter screamed warnings she ignored. This was knife-fighting range, close enough to see individual rocks on the ridgeline, close enough to die. The enemy opened up first. Tracers arced across the sky, green streaks that seemed lazy, until you realized how fast they were actually moving. Marin jerked the stick, threading between streams of fire. The A-10 shuddered as rounds punched through the fuselage, but the titanium bathtub around the cockpit held. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 roared, a sound like tearing fabric amplified 1,000 times. The recoil slowed the entire aircraft, 30mm shells streaming downward at 70 rounds per second. Rock exploded, dust erupted. She couldn't see if she'd hit anything. Marin pulled up hard, the G-forces pressing her into the seat as the Warthog climbed out of the canyon. Her breath came in controlled bursts, training overriding adrenaline. She banked right, arcing back toward the valley for another pass. The radio erupted with voices. Good hits, good hits. Hawthorne, you got 2 positions on the southern ridge. That was Paladin 1-6, the young Marine. She could hear the relief in his voice, desperate and raw. But she could also hear the gunfire behind him, unrelenting. 2 positions down. How many left? She checked her fuel gauge. 15 minutes, maybe less. The wind was picking up, buffeting the aircraft as storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Visibility was dropping fast. She keyed her mic. Paladin, I need target priority. What's hitting you hardest? Static then. Machine gun nest, eastern ridge, approximately 50 meters above our position. They've got us pinned. We can't move our wounded. Marin's eyes narrowed. The eastern ridge. That meant crossing the entire width of the canyon, exposing herself to every enemy gun in the valley. It meant flying slow, steady, predictable. It meant becoming a target. She toggled her radio to the command frequency. Bagram Actual, Hawthorne 2-1. Enemy is concentrated on eastern ridge. I'm engaging. Major Kellerman's voice came back immediately. Hawthorne, your fuel state is critical. Break off and return to base. She didn't respond. Instead, she nosed the A-10 down, diving back into the canyon. The world compressed into a narrow corridor of rock and sky. Her hands moved across the controls with the precision of muscle memory, adjustments so small they were almost unconscious. The machine gun nest appeared on her targeting display, a dark smudge against the ridge. She could see muzzle flashes now, bright points of light in the gathering dusk. They saw her too. The tracers came thick and fast, a wall of fire that filled her vision. The Warthog bucked as rounds struck home, alarms blaring in the cockpit, hydraulic pressure dropping, starboard engine temperature rising. She ignored it all and lined up her shot. The distance closed, 500 meters, 400, 300. At 200 meters she fired. The cannon spoke again, a voice of thunder and steel. The ridge erupted in flame and debris. Secondary explosions bloomed as ammunition cooked off. She pulled up, straining against the controls. The stick felt sluggish, unresponsive. One of the hydraulics was definitely gone. The Warthog climbed anyway because that's what it was built to do. Behind her, the marine frequency exploded with cheers. Hawthorne, you're a goddamn angel. The nest is down. We can move. The A-10 limped through the sky, trailing thin smoke from the starboard engine. Marin ran through her emergency checklist, eyes scanning the caution lights that painted the cockpit in amber and red. She had maybe 10 minutes of fuel left, and that was if the damaged engine didn't quit entirely. The canyon fell away behind her as she gained altitude, the convoy now a small cluster of vehicles far below. She could see movement down there, tiny figures running between the trucks, dragging wounded toward cover. They were mobile again, that was something. The radio crackled. Hawthorne 2-1, Bagram Actual. We've got emergency crews standing by. What's your status? Marin hesitated. Her status was bad and getting worse. She could feel the aircraft fighting her, the controls mushy and unpredictable. But the Marines were still in contact. The enemy hadn't pulled back. They were regrouping, trying to flank the convoy's new position. She could see them on the ridgeline, dark shapes moving with tactical precision. One more pass. That's all it would take. One more gun run to scatter them long enough for the convoy to reach the extraction point. But she wouldn't have enough fuel to make it back to Bagram. She'd be going down somewhere in these mountains, assuming the aircraft held together long enough for her to choose where. She thought about her daughter, Emma, 17 years old and already talking about the Air Force Academy. Thought about the last conversation they'd had, Emma asking why she kept flying these missions when she could be instructing at some safe base in Nevada. Marin had told her it was about the mission, about the people on the ground who needed her. Emma had rolled her eyes. You mean it's about you being stubborn? Maybe it was. Maybe stubbornness was just another word for commitment, for the refusal to abandon people who were counting on you. She keyed the radio. Bagram, Hawthorne 2-1. I'm making one more pass. Enemy forces are attempting to flank the convoy. If I don't suppress them now, those Marines won't make it to extraction. Kellerman's voice was sharp. Negative, Hawthorne, you are ordered to return to base immediately. That is a direct order. Marin smiled. Direct orders. She'd followed plenty of those in her 20 years of service, but she'd also learned that sometimes orders and what was right didn't align. Sometimes you had to choose. Bagram, I'm experiencing radio malfunction. Transmission breaking up. She switched off the command frequency before Kellerman could respond. The Marines were still on emergency freak. She could hear them calling for air support, their voices tight with fear and exhaustion. She pushed the throttle forward, pointing the Warthog's nose back toward the canyon. The enemy fighters moved like shadows across the ridgeline, a dozen of them at least, working their way toward the convoy's flank. They were good, using the terrain for cover, advancing in coordinated pairs. Marin could see their strategy unfolding below her like a chess game. They'd pin the Marines from the high ground, then move in close while the Americans were focused on the original position. Classic hammer and anvil. It would work too if she didn't stop it. She checked her ammunition counter. 140 rounds left, barely enough for a single sustained burst. She'd have to make it count. The A-10 dropped into the canyon one last time, engines screaming their protest. The smoke from her damaged turbofan was thicker now, a dark trail that marked her position like a target banner. The enemy saw her coming and opened fire. The sky filled with tracers, green and orange streams that crisscrossed above the valley floor. Marin jinked left, then right, the sluggish controls making every maneuver an act of faith. A round punched through the canopy, spiderwebbing the glass inches from her head. She felt the rush of freezing air, heard the whistle of wind through the hole. Her ears popped. The altimeter was going crazy, the pressure changes confusing the instruments. She flew by feel now, by instinct, the way old pilots did before computers took over flying. The flanking force was directly ahead, exposed on the open slope as they moved between cover points. She armed the gun. This was it, everything she had left. She whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her, something about courage and grace, then squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 roared its final song. 30mm shells walked across the ridgeline, each round the size of a milk bottle, each impact like a small bomb. Rocks shattered. Bodies disappeared in clouds of dust and fire. The recoil shook the Warthog so hard she thought the airframe might tear itself apart. Then the gun went silent, empty. She pulled up, every alarm in the cockpit screaming now. The starboard engine quit, turbine seizing with a grinding shudder. Fuel pressure dropped to zero. The controls went dead. For a moment, she was just a woman in a falling metal box, gravity reasserting its dominion over her brief claim to the sky. But the Warthog had one last gift to give. She found a glide path, trading altitude for distance, the single remaining engine providing just enough thrust to keep the nose up. Below her, the convoy was moving again, racing toward the extraction point. The ground rose to meet her with the inevitability of a closing door. Marin scanned the terrain below, looking for anything flat enough to put down on. The valley floor was a maze of boulders and ravines, nothing that looked survivable. She had maybe 30 seconds before the glide gave out entirely. To her left, a dried riverbed cut through the mountains, its surface relatively smooth. Relatively. It would have to do. She banked the dying aircraft, feeling it respond sluggishly to her input. The A-10 wasn't designed for graceful landings, but it was designed to absorb punishment. Time to test that design philosophy. She keyed the emergency frequency one last time. Paladin 16, Hawthorne 21. I'm going down in the riverbed approximately 3 clicks west of your position. Tell my daughter I love her." The Marine's voice crackled back, urgent and desperate. "Hawthorne, we're coming for you. Do not, I repeat, do not go dark on us." She smiled. Good kid. But they both knew the math. The convoy couldn't divert. They had wounded and the enemy was still active. Coming after her would mean sacrificing the mission, sacrificing the Marines they'd fought so hard to save. She wouldn't allow that. The riverbed filled her vision. 20 seconds. She pulled back on the stick, trying to bleed off airspeed. The stall warning blared. 15 seconds. She extended what landing gear would still extend. The nose gear light stayed red. Asymmetric. This was going to hurt. 10 seconds. She braced herself, hands locked on the controls even though they no longer did anything. Training said to ride it in, maintain attitude, don't fight the crash. Experience said training was written by people who'd never actually crashed. 5 seconds. The world became rock and dust and speed. The A-10 hit hard, the impact slamming her forward against the harness straps. The canopy shattered. Metal screamed as the fuselage scraped across stone, throwing sparks that looked like stars in the failing light. The port wing snapped off, cartwheeling away into the darkness. She tasted blood. The world spun. Then everything stopped. Silence. The kind of silence that comes after violence when the universe takes a breath before moving on. Marin hung in her harness upside down, the cockpit canted at a 40-degree angle. Blood ran up her face, following gravity's new direction. She tried to move. Her left arm responded. Her right didn't. Probably broken. She could feel the sharp edges grinding together. Her legs seemed okay. That was something. She reached for the harness release with her working hand. The harness clicked free and Marin dropped, catching herself awkwardly with her left arm. Pain exploded through her right side, bright and clarifying. Definitely broken. Maybe more than one bone. She gritted her teeth and crawled out of the cockpit, dragging herself through the shattered canopy. The A-10's fuselage was a twisted wreck, barely recognizable as an aircraft. 30 feet behind it, a deep gouge in the riverbed marked her landing path. She traveled at least 200 meters after impact, the Warthog's titanium belly acting as a sled. By all rights, she should be dead. She made it 10 feet from the wreckage before collapsing against a boulder. The cold hit her immediately. The temperature was dropping fast as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. She was at altitude, maybe 8,000 feet, and her flight suit was torn in a dozen places. Shock would come soon if she didn't manage it. She assessed her gear with the methodical detachment of training. Her survival radio was still clipped to her vest, miraculously intact. No weapon, she'd lost the sidearm in the crash. Her knife was still strapped to her leg. She had a first aid kit, water bottle, and 3 flares. Not much to survive on in hostile territory, but it was more than some pilots had worked with. She keyed the survival radio. "Any station, this is Hawthorne 2-1. I'm down but mobile. Position approximately." She rattled off coordinates from memory, triangulating from the mountains she'd memorized on the approach. No response. Either the radio's range was too limited or no one was in position to receive. She tried again, still nothing. The sound of gunfire echoed from the canyon, distant but distinct. The Marines were still fighting their way out. She hoped they'd make it. Hoped her final gun run had bought them enough time. That's all any of it was about, really. Buying time. Giving people a chance to make it home. She thought about Emma again. Her daughter would be angry. Angry and heartbroken and probably too stubborn to cry in front of anyone, just like her mother. Marin had left letters, of course. Every deployment, every mission. Letters explaining why she flew, why she stayed in, why the risk was worth it. Emma would read them eventually. Maybe she'd understand, maybe she wouldn't. That was okay too. The stars emerged overhead, brilliant and cold. Marin watched them, feeling very small and very old. Her radio crackled with static, then a voice faint but clear. "Hawthorne 2-1, this is Paladin 1-6. We have your coordinates. CSAR is inbound, hold position. We're coming for you." Marin closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of relief before the training kicked back in. Combat search and rescue wouldn't arrive for hours, even in the best conditions. The weather was deteriorating, night was falling, and the enemy knew there was a downed American pilot in the area. She was a target now, valuable and vulnerable. She forced herself upright, biting back a gasp as her broken arm shifted. The pain was good. It kept her sharp, focused. She needed to move, put distance between herself and the crash site. The wreckage was visible from the air and probably from several ground positions. Staying here meant getting found by the wrong people. She gathered her minimal gear with her working hand and started moving west, paralleling the riverbed. Each step was measured, deliberate. She stayed in shadow where possible, avoiding the open spaces where moonlight would silhouette her against the pale stone. The mountains had taught her to be careful. 20 years of flying over them, studying their ridges and valleys, learning how light and shadow played across their faces. Now she walked among them as something other than an untouchable god in a cockpit. She was just another human, broken and alone, trying to survive until dawn. After 30 minutes, she found a crevice in the canyon wall, a narrow opening that led back into deeper darkness. She squeezed inside, the stone cold against her torn flight suit. The space was barely large enough for her body, but it was concealed, defensible, good enough. She settled in, back against the wall, facing the opening. Her survival radio whispered static. She kept it on, volume low, monitoring for any transmissions. Hours passed. The cold worked its way into her bones despite her efforts to stay warm. She cycled between shivering and forcing her muscles to relax, managing her body's responses like she managed aircraft systems. Everything was about conservation now. Energy, heat, focus. Around midnight she heard them. Voices speaking Pashto maybe 100 meters down the canyon. Flashlights swept across the rocks, searching. She pressed deeper into the crevice, barely breathing. The lights came closer, 50 meters, 40. She could hear their footsteps now, the crunch of boots on stone. Her hand found her knife, gripping it with her left hand even though she'd never trained to fight left-handed. 30 meters. They were talking about the crashed aircraft, arguing about whether the pilot had survived. One voice insisted they search the area thoroughly. Another wanted to return to the main force before the Americans sent helicopters, 20 meters. The flashlight beam swept across the canyon wall, passing over her hiding spot. Marin stopped breathing. The beam moved on, then stopped, came back, lingered on the crevice opening. She tensed, ready to fight. But then another voice called out from somewhere down the canyon. The lights turned away. The footsteps receded. She waited another hour before allowing herself to breathe normally. The first gray light of dawn found Marin still wedged in her stone sanctuary, half frozen and running on nothing but will. She dozed intermittently through the night, never fully sleeping, alert to every sound that echoed through the canyon. Her broken arm had swollen inside her flight suit, the fabric tight against inflamed tissue. She'd need to splint it soon, but that would require movement, exposure. Not yet. Her survival radio crackled to life. Hawthorne 2-1, Hawthorne 2-1, this is Rescue 7-2. We are inbound to your last known position. Pop smoke if able, over. She fumbled for the radio with her good hand. Rescue 7-2, Hawthorne, I'm mobile but injured. Cannot pop smoke, enemy forces active in the area. I'll mark position with mirror flash when you're close. Static then. Copy, Hawthorne. We're 10 mics out. Stay alive. 10 minutes. After the longest night of her life, salvation was 10 minutes away. But 10 minutes was an eternity in a combat zone. She eased herself out of the crevice, every muscle screaming protest. The canyon was quiet in the early light, no sign of the search party from last night, but they'd be back. She was sure of it. She moved to a position with a clear view of the sky, staying low among the rocks. Her signal mirror was in the survival kit, a simple piece of polished metal that could reflect sunlight for miles. The problem was it could be seen from the ground too. She'd have one chance to get this right. The sound of rotors echoed off the canyon walls, distant but growing louder. A Blackhawk, maybe two. She waited, watching the sky, timing it perfectly. There. The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline, black against the pale morning sky. She angled the mirror, catching the sun's rays, flashing the standard signal. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. The Blackhawk banked hard, heading directly toward her position. Behind it, an Apache attack helicopter rose into view, guns traversing, hunting for threats. Professional, coordinated, beautiful. Then the enemy opened fire. Muzzle flashes erupted from the eastern ridge where they'd been waiting in ambush. The Taliban had learned this trick in 20 years of war. Wait for the rescue bird, shoot it down, get 2 prizes for 1 ambush. The Apache responded instantly, rockets streaking toward the enemy positions. Explosions bloomed across the ridgeline. The Black Hawk dropped low, racing toward Marin's position. She waved with her good arm, marking herself. The helicopter flared, wheels touching down 50 feet away. The side door gunner laid down, suppressing fire, his minigun roaring. A pararescue jumper sprinted toward her, body armor and rifle ready. He reached her position, keyed his radio. "I've got her. Broken arm, possible internal injuries. She's ambulatory." The PJ, his name tape reading KOVACS, supported Marin's weight as they ran toward the Black Hawk. Rounds snapped past them, close enough to hear. The Apache overhead was systematically destroying enemy positions, but more kept appearing. This was a prepared ambush, well coordinated. The Taliban had known the Americans would come for their downed pilot. Marin stumbled, pain lancing through her side. Kovacs caught her, practically carrying her the last 20 feet. Other hands reached out from the helicopter, pulling them both aboard. The Black Hawk lifted off before they were fully inside, the pilot not waiting for confirmation. Smart. The ground dropped away. Tracer fire followed them up, green streaks that fell short as the helicopter gained altitude. Marin collapsed against the bulkhead, adrenaline finally giving way to exhaustion. A flight medic was already working on her arm, cutting away the torn flight suit sleeve. "Easy, ma'am. You're safe now. We got you." She nodded, unable to speak. The medic continued working, professional and efficient. Splint, pressure bandages, IV line. She watched with detached interest as if it were happening to someone else. Kovacs sat across from her, removing his helmet. He was young, maybe 25, with the calm competence that came from extensive training. "Ma'am, I have to say that was the ballsiest flying I've ever seen. You saved those Marines." Marin managed a weak smile. "Just doing my job." "With all due respect, ma'am, that was way beyond your job. You stayed when everyone else pulled back. You made 3 gun runs with a shot-up aircraft. You put yourself between those Marines and certain death." He shook his head. "That's not just doing your job, that's being a goddamn hero." The word felt strange to her. Hero. She'd never thought of herself that way. She was just a pilot who'd made some choices, who decided that 18 Marines were worth the risk. Anyone would have done the same. Except everyone else had pulled back. She'd been the only one who stayed. The helicopter leveled off, heading west toward Bagram. Through the open door, Marin could see the mountains spreading below, beautiful and terrible in the morning light. She'd spent 20 years flying over them, learning their moods, their dangers. Now she'd walked among them, bled on them, survived them. Kovacs was still talking, saying something about medals and recommendations. She wasn't listening. She was thinking about the Marines, wondering if they'd made it to the extraction point, wondering if her final gun run had been enough. The medic checked her vitals, his expression serious. "Colonel, we're taking you straight to the hospital. You've got internal bleeding, probably from the crash impact. You need surgery." She nodded. That explained the pain in her side, the dizziness that kept threatening to overwhelm her. Her body was shutting down, finally acknowledging the damage she'd been ignoring through sheer force of will. Bagram Airfield appeared ahead, a sprawl of concrete and metal in the mountain valley. The Black Hawk descended rapidly, heading straight for the medical facility. Marin watched the base grow larger, feeling strangely disconnected from everything. They touched down on the hospital pad. Medical personnel swarmed the helicopter before the rotors even stopped. Gurney, urgent voices, quick hands transferring her from the aircraft. She caught a glimpse of Major Kellerman standing at the edge of the pad, his face grim. Above them, a formation of A-10s flew past in missing man formation, one position empty. Her position, they already knew. Word had spread through the base that Mother Hen had gone down saving a Marine convoy, the old Warthog pilot who defied orders and made one last pass. They were mourning her even though she was still alive. The thought made her angry. She wasn't dead. She'd survived. She'd completed the mission. The surgery was a blur of bright lights and chemical smells. Doctors worked with the efficient urgency of combat medicine, stemming the internal bleeding, setting her broken bones, stitching the dozens of smaller wounds she hadn't even noticed. She drifted in and out of consciousness, dreams mixing with memories. Emma's face, the canyon walls, the sound of the GAU-8, the young Marine's voice on the radio. When she finally woke, truly woke, the hospital room was dark except for the monitors beside her bed. Their soft beeping was oddly comforting, proof she was alive. A figure sat in the corner chair, silhouetted against the window. Major Kellerman stood when he saw her eyes open. "Welcome back, Colonel." His voice was rough, tired. "You've been out for 18 hours." Marin tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Kellerman poured water from a pitcher, held the cup while she sipped. "The Marines made it," he said. "All 18 of them. Your gun runs broke the ambush. They reached the extraction point and got pulled out." Relief flooded through her. "Good." Kellerman sat on the edge of the bed, his expression unreadable. "You disobeyed a direct order. You pretended to have radio malfunction. You risked a multi-million-dollar aircraft and your own life on a mission that command had already written off." She met his gaze. "Yes, sir." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "And you saved 18 Marines who would otherwise be dead. Hell of a trade." "I did what needed to be done." "That's the problem, Hawthorne. You're always doing what needs to be done, even when it's insane, even when it's impossible. You've been doing it for 20 years and command has never quite known what to make of you." He pulled a folder from his jacket. "These are statements from the Marines you saved. You want to hear what they said?" Kellerman opened the folder, pulling out several typed pages. "This is from Corporal James Martinez, 22 years old, from El Paso," he says. "When I heard that A-10 coming back, after they told us no air support was available, I thought I was hallucinating. Then I saw the gun run, saw the enemy positions getting torn apart, and I knew someone up there wasn't giving up on us. Later I learned it was a pilot who'd already been ordered to return to base, who came back anyway because she could hear us calling for help. I don't know what else to call that except love. Not the easy kind, but the kind that costs something." Kellerman set that page aside, picked up another. "Sergeant First Class Deshaun Thompson, 31, from Detroit," he says. "I've been in combat for 8 years. I've seen brave men and women do incredible things. But I never saw anyone do what Lieutenant Colonel Hawthorne did. She flew into hell with a shot-up aircraft, minimal ammunition, and no backup, and she did it 3 times. The third time she had to know she wasn't coming back. She did it anyway. My wife gets to see me again because of her. My kids get to have their father. I owe her everything." The words hung in the air. Marin felt tears threatening, pushed them back. She wasn't crying, not here, not now. Kellerman continued. "There are 16 more statements just like these. Every Marine in that convoy wrote one. They're recommending you for the Medal of Honor. That's not necessary. It's not about what's necessary, Colonel. It's about recognition. It's about telling the world what you did, what you've always done. You know what they call you behind your back, right? Mother hen, like it's an insult." Marin laughed, then winced as pain shot through her ribs. "I know, I've heard it. Well, those Marines have a different name for you now. They call you the Angel of Bagram. They're telling everyone who will listen about the pilot who came back when no one else would, about the woman who traded her own safety for theirs without hesitation." He stood, paced to the window. "Command is having a field day with this. Do you know how many times the Air Force has tried to retire the A-10? How many times they've said it's obsolete, that modern warfare doesn't need close air support? Then you go and pull off a mission like this, and suddenly every congressman is asking why we're trying to get rid of such a capable platform. I didn't do it for politics. I know you didn't, that's what makes it matter." He turned back to face her. "The thing is, Hawthorne, you've been proving people wrong your entire career. When they said you were too old to fly combat missions, you outperformed pilots half your age. When they said the Warthog was outdated, you showed them what it could still do in the right hands." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. A nurse entered, followed by a young woman with dark hair and fierce eyes that Marin recognized immediately. Emma. Her daughter rushed to the bedside, tears streaming down her face. "Mom! Oh my God, Mom!" She grabbed Marin's hand, the one that wasn't in a cast, holding it like she might disappear. "I saw the news. They said you crashed. They said you were dead." "I'm okay, baby. I'm right here." Emma's expression cycled through relief, anger, fear, and back to anger. You said it was a routine mission. You said you'd be home in a month. You didn't say you were planning to kill yourself saving people. Marin squeezed her daughter's hand. I didn't plan it, Emma. It just happened. The situation developed and I made a choice. A choice to die. A choice to try. There's a difference. Emma sat heavily in the chair Kellerman had vacated, wiping at her tears. The Marines came to see me. While you were in surgery, a whole group of them showed up at base housing asking if I was your daughter. They told me what you did. They showed me pictures of their families, their kids. They said those kids have a mother or father because of you. Marin didn't know what to say to that. Kellerman cleared his throat. I'll give you two some privacy. He headed for the door, paused. Colonel, for what it's worth, I would have made the same call you did. Command can court-martial me for saying so, but it's true. What you did yesterday wasn't just heroic, it was right. After he left, Emma leaned forward, her expression serious. I've been angry at you for so long, angry that you kept deploying, kept flying dangerous missions, kept choosing the Air Force over me. But those Marines helped me understand something. What's that? That you're not choosing the Air Force over me. You're choosing to be the person who doesn't leave people behind. That's who you are. That's who you raised me to be. And I can be angry about the risk and scared for you and still be so incredibly proud that you're my mother. The tears came then, finally, sliding down Marin's face. I'm sorry I scared you. Don't be sorry, just promise me you'll survive. Promise me you'll come home. I promise. Emma smiled through her own tears. Good, because I need you to be there when I graduate from the academy. Someone has to pin on my wings. The academy? I thought you were considering law school. I was. But after yesterday, after seeing what you did and what it meant to those Marines, I realized I want to fly. I want to be like you. Marin's heart swelled with pride and terror, her daughter following in her footsteps. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of recovery and unwanted attention. News of the mission had leaked, as things always did in the military. First through unofficial channels, social media posts from soldiers at Bagram. Then through official statements, carefully worded press releases. The story took on a life of its own. The female pilot who defied orders to save a surrounded convoy. The aging warthog making one last stand against retirement. The heroic crash landing and overnight survival in enemy territory. It was the kind of story that cut through the noise of endless war, that reminded people why they'd supported military intervention in the first place. Networks requested interviews. Magazines wanted cover stories. Even Hollywood called, inquiring about film rights. Marin refused them all from her hospital bed. She wasn't interested in fame. She'd done her job. That was enough. But the attention found her anyway. Generals visited, awkward in their praise. Politicians stopped by for photo opportunities that Marin endured with gritted teeth. Fellow pilots came too, pilots who'd made jokes about Mother Hen just days earlier. Now they looked at her differently, spoke with respect that hadn't been there before. It made her uncomfortable. She was the same person she'd been before the mission. The same middle-aged pilot flying an old aircraft. The circumstances had changed, not her. 3 days after the mission, a delegation of Marines arrived. They came in dress uniforms, formal and proper, led by a young sergeant with a serious face. Marin recognized his voice before she saw his name tape. Paladin 16, Sergeant Marcus Chen, the Marine who'd called for air support in the canyon. Colonel Hawthorne. He stood at attention beside her bed. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted, and please sit down, all of you. This is a hospital room, not a parade ground. They sat, filling every available chair. 18 Marines, some with visible injuries, all with the same expression of gratitude and something deeper. Debt. The kind that couldn't be repaid. Chen spoke first. Ma'am, we came to say thank you. I know that sounds inadequate for what you did, but we don't have better words. You saved our lives, all of us. You came back when everyone else pulled away. You flew into fire and kept flying until your aircraft fell apart. Because of you, we're alive. Our families are intact, our futures are possible. He paused, visibly emotional. I called for air support that day thinking it was my last act. I'd made peace with dying. Then I heard your voice on the radio, calm as anything, telling me to pop smoke, and I knew someone was fighting for us. Another Marine, an older corporal with burned scars on his arms, leaned forward. Before you came back, we were making our last stands. writing final messages on scraps of paper, saying goodbye to people we'd never see again. You changed that. You gave us hope, then you gave us a future. Marin listened to each Marine speak, their stories flowing like water finding its path. They talked about the ambush, the desperate fight, the moment they heard the A-10's guns tear through enemy positions. They described watching her aircraft take hits, seeing smoke trail from the engines, knowing she was dying to keep them alive. One Marine, a lance corporal named Sarah Acaffer, spoke about her daughter. "She's 3 years old, ma'am. She was born while I was deployed, so I've missed so much of her life already. I was supposed to rotate home next month. If you hadn't come back, my girl would have grown up without knowing her mother." Her voice cracked. "How do I ever repay that?" "You don't," Marin said quietly. "You go home, you be the mother your daughter needs, you live a good life, that's the payment." The Marines nodded, but she could see they didn't fully accept that answer. They wanted to do something, give something back. That's how debt worked. It demanded settlement. Chen reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. "Ma'am, we took up a collection, had something made. It's not official or anything, but we wanted you to have it." He handed her the box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a challenge coin, but not a standard coin. This one was custom, beautifully crafted. One side showed an A-10 Thunderbolt II, wings level, diving into a canyon. The other side bore an inscription: "For those who return Hawthorne 2-1, angels don't need wings, just courage." Below that, 18 names, every Marine in the convoy. Marin held the coin, feeling its weight. It was the most meaningful award she'd ever received, worth more than any medal command might pin on her chest. "Thank you," she managed. "This means everything." The Marine stood, preparing to leave. Chen lingered. "Ma'am, one more thing, I'm staying in. I was considering getting out after this deployment, going to college, leaving all this behind. But after what you showed me about service, about not abandoning people who need you, I've decided to make a career of it. You changed my perspective on what it means to be a Marine." After they left, Marin sat alone with the coin, turning it over in her hand. The light caught the engraving, making the A-10 seem to move. She'd spent 20 years flying, defending, protecting. She'd been mocked, dismissed, called mother hen with barely concealed contempt. She'd ignored it all, focused on the mission, on doing her job well. Now she realized that doing your job well consistently with commitment and skill was its own form of heroism. Not because it was flashy or dramatic, but because it was reliable. People could count on it. Those Marines had counted on her, and she hadn't let them down. Emma returned that evening, carrying dinner from the base commissary. Real food, not hospital meals. They ate together in companionable silence, the kind that comes from deep familiarity. Finally, Emma spoke. "I've been reading about the Medal of Honor process. They're serious about putting you up for it. It's not necessary." "Mom, stop deflecting. Stop acting like what you did was ordinary. It wasn't. It was extraordinary, and you need to accept that." Marin set down her fork. "I don't want to be extraordinary, Em. I just want to be good at my job." "You're both. Deal with it." Emma's tone softened. "Look, I've spent my whole life watching you be humble about your accomplishments, watching you downplay your abilities while men with half your skill got promoted ahead of you. You've been fighting for respect your entire career, and you've earned it 1,000 times over. Let them give you the medal. Let them acknowledge what you did. Not for yourself, but for every woman who'll come after you, who'll see that being capable and dedicated and willing to sacrifice means something." It was the most adult speech Emma had ever given her. When had her daughter grown up? When had she become so wise? "When did you get so smart?" Marin asked. Emma smiled. "I learned from the best." They finished eating as the sun set outside the hospital window, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. The same mountains Marin had crashed in, had survived in, had walked through in darkness. They looked different now, less threatening. Just geography, just stone and snow. The danger had been temporary, conditional. The beauty was permanent. A doctor arrived to check her vitals, express satisfaction with her recovery. "You're healing well, Colonel. Better than we expected, honestly. The internal bleeding has stopped, the fractures are setting properly. I'd say you're looking at 6 weeks before you can return to limited duty, 3 months before you're flight ready again." 3 months. It felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Marin nodded her thanks. After the doctor left, Emma stood, preparing to go. I have to head back to school tomorrow, finals next week. How are your classes going? Good, I'm pulling straight A's. My physics professor said I have an intuitive grasp of aerodynamics. Wonder where I got that. Marin laughed. Must be genetic. Emma hugged her carefully, mindful of the injuries. I love you, Mom. I'm proud of you. I'm also still angry you scared me, but mostly proud. I love you too, baby. Ace those finals. The hospital discharged Marin after a week, with strict instructions about physical therapy and follow-up appointments. She moved into temporary quarters on base, a small room in the transient officers' barracks. It was strange being grounded after 20 years of regular flight operations. She felt disconnected, purposeless. She took walks around the base, slow at first, then gradually longer as her strength returned. Her arm was still in a cast, her ribs still taped, but movement helped. It always had. During one of these walks, she found herself at the flight line, watching A-10s take off and land. The familiar sounds washed over her, the distinctive growl of the turbofans, the radio chatter, the smell of jet fuel. Home. A young pilot approached, maybe 26, with lieutenant's bars on her flight suit. Colonel Hawthorne, I'm Lieutenant Ashley Foster. I just wanted to say it's an honor to meet you. Marin shook her hand. Just Marin is fine. No, ma'am, it's really not. Foster's expression was intense, earnest. You're a legend. Everyone in the squadron talks about your mission, about how you showed them what the Warthog can still do. My flight lead said you've been fighting for this platform for years, proving it's still relevant. He said you kept the A-10 alive through sheer competence and determination. The A-10 keeps itself alive by being good at what it does. Maybe. But it needed someone to demonstrate that, to make command remember why close air support matters. That was you, Foster hesitated. Can I ask you something? Sure. How did you deal with the mockery, the jokes about your age, about flying an outdated aircraft? Everyone knows what they called you. Marin smiled. Mother hen, yeah, I heard. The trick is not to let other people's opinions define your worth. I knew what I was capable of. I knew the A-10's capabilities. I didn't need external validation. I just needed to be excellent at my job. But didn't it hurt? Didn't it make you angry? Sometimes, but anger is just energy. You can waste it on resentment or you can channel it into proving them wrong through your performance. I chose the latter. Foster nodded slowly. There's a group of us, female pilots in the squadron. We get together weekly, kind of an informal support group. Would you be willing to speak to them, share your experience? Marin hesitated. Public speaking wasn't her strength. But she thought about Emma, about the young women coming up through the ranks, facing the same challenges she'd faced. Sure, I can do that. The gathering happened 3 days later in a small conference room at the squadron building. 15 female pilots, ranging from fresh lieutenants to seasoned captains. They looked at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Marin stood before the assembled pilots, suddenly uncertain. She'd flown combat missions for 2 decades, faced enemy fire, survived a crash landing. But talking about her experiences to a room full of expectant faces felt harder somehow, more vulnerable. I'm not great at speeches, she began. So I'm just going to talk and you can interrupt with questions whenever. The pilots nodded. One raised her hand immediately. How did you maintain confidence when you were constantly being underestimated? Marin thought about it. I separated my internal sense of competence from external validation. I knew I was good. I practiced constantly, studied tactics, learned from every mission. That knowledge gave me a foundation that didn't depend on what anyone else thought. But didn't it affect your career progression? I mean, you're a lieutenant colonel. With your record, you should be a general by now. Comment hit close to home. Marin had been passed over for promotion multiple times, watching less experienced officers advance while she remained in the cockpit. Yeah, it affected my progression. I made choices that prioritized flying over politics. I spoke honestly in meetings when diplomacy might have served me better. I focused on the mission instead of networking. Those choices have consequences. She paused. But I also got to spend 20 years doing what I love. Flying, protecting people. Making a difference, that's worth more than rank. Another pilot spoke up. What about the mission that landed you here? Walking us through your decision-making would be helpful. Marin described the mission methodically, laying out the tactical situation, the choices she'd faced, the calculations she'd made. She talked about hearing the Marines on the radio, about knowing the math was bad but the need was real. At some point, she said, you have to decide what you're willing to risk. What's worth the cost? For me, 18 lives were worth my aircraft, worth the risk to myself. Not everyone will make that same calculation, and that's okay. But you need to know your own values before you're in the situation, because there's no time to figure it out when bullets are flying. A captain near the back raised her hand. The official report says you disregarded a direct order to return to base. How do you justify that? It was a challenging question, one that cut to the heart of military discipline. Marin met the captain's gaze steadily. I don't justify it. I made a choice to prioritize the lives of Marines over following orders. That choice had consequences I was prepared to accept. I'm not recommending you disobey orders, but I am saying that sometimes you'll face situations where the right thing and the authorized thing don't align. When that happens, you need to be prepared to defend your decisions and accept responsibility for the outcomes. The discussion continued for over an hour, ranging across topics from dealing with discrimination to tactical decision-making to maintaining relationships while deployed. Marin found herself sharing stories she'd never told anyone, experiences she'd kept private. The young pilots listened intently, occasionally interjecting with their own experiences. A pattern emerged in their stories. The subtle dismissals, the assumptions of incompetence, the extra scrutiny that came with being female in a male-dominated field. They all nodded in recognition as each story was told. One lieutenant described being excluded from mission planning sessions, her input dismissed by older pilots. Another talked about being hit on by superior officers, about navigating the line between professionalism and not making waves. A third shared her experience of being the only woman in her squadron, the isolation of having no peers who understood her perspective. It gets better, Marin told them. Slowly, too slowly, but it does improve. When I started flying, there were barely any women in combat roles. Now there are enough that you can form groups like this, support each other. In another decade, there will be even more. You're building the foundation for the women who come after you. Foster leaned forward. Do you think what you did in that canyon will change things? Will it make them take female pilots more seriously? Marin considered the question carefully. Maybe, probably not as much as we'd like. One mission doesn't erase decades of bias, but it does add to the body of evidence that competence isn't gendered, that women can perform at the highest levels of combat aviation. Every time one of us proves ourselves, it makes it slightly easier for the next woman. That's how change happens. Incrementally through accumulated proof. That's depressing, someone muttered. It's realistic, Marin countered. But realistic doesn't mean hopeless. You're all here because women before you broke barriers. You'll break barriers that make it easier for the women after you. That's the contract we make with the future. The meeting eventually wound down. The pilots filed out, several stopping to thank Marin personally. Foster hung back. That was really valuable, ma'am. Having someone with your experience share honestly about the challenges makes us feel less alone. You're not alone, Marin said. That's the whole point. There's a network of women in military aviation, all facing similar challenges, all supporting each other. Tap into that network, contribute to it, help it grow. After Foster left, Marin walked back toward her quarters, thinking about the conversation. She'd spent so much of her career focused inward on her own performance, her own missions. She hadn't considered herself part of a larger movement, hadn't thought about her role in opening doors. But maybe that had been short-sighted. Maybe individual excellence and collective progress weren't separate things. Maybe every time she flew well, led effectively, survived impossible situations, she was contributing to something larger than herself. The physical therapy sessions were tedious but necessary. Marin worked with a senior therapist, a former Army medic named Rodriguez who'd seen his share of broken soldiers. He pushed her hard, knowing that pilots needed full range of motion, complete strength recovery. "You're healing well," Rodriguez said during one session, watching her work through resistance exercises. "Better than most crash survivors. You must have been in excellent shape before the incident." I try to stay fit. Flying the Warthog is more physical than people think. It's more than that. You've got the kind of conditioning that comes from years of discipline. Most pilots your age, frankly, aren't this committed to physical fitness. Marin shrugged. I never wanted my body to be the limiting factor. I've seen too many good pilots get grounded because they let themselves go. Rodriguez made a note on his clipboard. At your current rate, you'll be cleared for flight duty in about 10 weeks. That's assuming no complications. 10 weeks. Less than 3 months. Marin felt a surge of anticipation. She needed to be back in the cockpit, needed the focus and purpose that came with flying. During a break in the therapy session, Rodriguez's assistant approached. "Colonel, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from the Pentagon." Marin found Major General Patricia O'Connor waiting in the reception area, dressed in service uniform with ribbons that told a story of extensive combat experience. Connor stood when Marin entered, offering her hand. "Colonel Hawthorne, thank you for making time." "Of course, ma'am, though I should mention I'm not officially on duty. Medical leave." "I know, this isn't an official visit, it's more of a courtesy call. Mind if we take a walk?" They walked the perimeter of the base, O'Connor matching her pace to Marin's recovery stride. "I'm here because your mission has created ripples at the highest levels of the Air Force. You've become a symbol, whether you wanted to be or not." "I didn't want to be. I figured, but symbols aren't about what individuals want. They're about what organizations need. Right now, the Air Force needs someone who represents the best of our values: courage, skill, dedication, sacrifice. You embody all of that." Marin stayed silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "There's a significant push to promote you to full colonel immediately, with a follow-on assignment to Pentagon staff. You'd be working on strategic initiatives, probably related to close air support doctrine and platform retention." "I don't want a desk job," O'Connor smiled. "I told them you'd say that, so here's my counteroffer. Let them promote you. Take the bump in rank and pay. But instead of a Pentagon assignment, I can get you command of an A-10 squadron. Your choice of location within reason." The offer hung in the air between them. Command. It was what Marin had wanted for years, what had been denied her as younger officers with better political instincts leapfrogged her on the promotion ladder. Now it was being offered, not because of politics, but because she'd proven herself in the most definitive way possible. "There's a catch," Marin said. "Isn't there always?" O'Connor's expression turned serious. "The catch is that you become the face of the A-10 program. Congress is debating the platform's future again. They want to divert funding to newer systems. Your mission gave the Warthog a reprieve, but it's temporary. If we want to keep the platform, we need someone who can advocate for it, someone with unquestionable credibility. That would be you. So I'd be a political prop. You'd be a combat-proven pilot speaking truth about a weapons system you know better than anyone alive. There's nothing prop-like about that. But yes, you'd be thrust into political discussions, congressional testimony, media appearances, the whole circus." Marin thought about it. She'd avoided politics her entire career, believing that excellence spoke for itself. But O'Connor was right. Symbols mattered. Narratives mattered. If she wanted the A-10 to survive, if she wanted future pilots to have access to this platform, someone needed to fight for it in the bureaucratic trenches. "Can I think about it?" "Take your time. The offer stands regardless of how long you need." They walked in silence for a while. Finally, O'Connor spoke again. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice taking time to consider. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Command is hard. Political advocacy is harder. Combining both is exponentially difficult." "Why are you doing this?" Marin asked. "You don't know me. Why stick your neck out to offer me command?" O'Connor stopped walking, turned to face her directly. "Because 30 years ago I was a young pilot facing the same challenges you faced. The dismissals, the assumptions, the constant need to prove myself. An older female pilot took me under her wing, mentored me, showed me it was possible to succeed despite the obstacles. She's retired now, but before she left, she made me promise something. She said, 'When you have power, use it to lift up the women coming behind you. Don't make them fight the same battles we fought.' So that's what I'm doing. Using my position to give you opportunities you've earned but been denied." It was the most honest thing anyone in command had ever said to Marin. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that more than you know." Just pay it forward. When you have the power, lift up the next generation. That's how we change the system, one act of support at a time. Marin spent the next week wrestling with the decision. Command had always been her goal, but not like this, not wrapped in politics and public relations. She wanted to lead because she was the best pilot, the most tactically sound officer, not because she'd become a symbol. She talked to Emma about it during their weekly video call. Her daughter's perspective was immediate and clear. Take it, Mom. Take the command and the promotion. You've earned it. But the politics are necessary. Look, I get that you hate the attention. You've always been about quiet competence, letting your work speak for itself. But your work has spoken loudly, and now you have a chance to translate that into meaningful change. The A-10 program, better support for female pilots, reform of the promotion system. You can influence all of that from a position of command. What if I fail? Emma's laugh crackled through the connection. You flew a shot-up aircraft through a canyon at dusk with minimal ammunition and no backup, then survived a crash landing and a night in enemy territory. I think you can handle some bureaucrats and politicians. The logic was sound. Marin had never shied from challenges. Why start now? She called General O'Connor the next day. I'll take the command and the advocacy role on one condition. Name it. I get to keep flying, not just administrative flights, real missions. If I'm going to speak about the A-10's capabilities, I need to maintain my edge, stay current with tactics and operational realities. Agreed. You'll fly as much as Squadron Command allows, which admittedly won't be as much as you'd like, but more than a typical squadron commander. The promotion ceremony happened 2 weeks later, a small affair at Bagram. Marin's injuries were healing but still visible, her arm recently freed from the cast but weak. General O'Connor flew in to conduct the ceremony personally. The squadron assembled in the hangar, A-10s parked in neat rows behind the makeshift stage. Marin stood at attention as O'Connor read the orders promoting her to full colonel. Emma watched via video link, having returned to school. The Marines from the convoy attended in person, sitting in the front row, 18 men and women who wouldn't be there without her. O'Connor pinned the new rank insignia on Marin's uniform, then stepped back. Colonel Hawthorne, you are hereby given command of the 354th Fighter Squadron. Your mission is to maintain combat readiness, develop tactical doctrine for close air support operations, and advocate for the A-10 platform at all levels of command. Do you accept this responsibility? I do, ma'am. Then take command. Marin faced the assembled squadron, seeing skepticism mixed with respect in their expressions. These were her pilots now, her responsibility. She needed to earn their trust, prove she deserved to lead. I'm not going to give you a long speech, she said. You've all heard plenty of those. I'm just going to tell you what I expect. Marin scanned the faces of her new squadron, reading their expressions. Some were enthusiastic, buying into the legend of the mission that had made her famous. Others were skeptical, wondering if she could actually lead or if this was just a PR move by command. A few were openly hostile, veterans who resented anyone jumping ahead in the promotion queue. She understood all those reactions, would have felt the same in their position. I expect excellence, she continued, not perfection. Perfection is impossible, but I expect each of you to be the best version of yourself.